Hello, dear learners. Welcome back to English Gateway, where learning English becomes an exciting and unforgettable adventure. Today, we begin the inspiring life story of one of the greatest leaders the world has ever known, Nelson Mandela. This is not just a story about a famous person. It is a story about courage, determination, sacrifice, and hope. As you listen, you will improve your English vocabulary, pronunciation, and listening skills while discovering valuable lessons that can help you in your own life. No matter where you come from or what challenges you face, Mandela's journey will show you that great dreams can become reality when you refuse to give up. So sit back, relax, and join me as we begin the remarkable story of Nelson Mandela, a man who changed the world forever. Nelson Mandela was born on July 18, 1918, in a small village called Mvezo, located in the Eastern Cape of South Africa. His birth name was Rolihlahla Mandela, a word from the Xhosa language. Literally, it means pulling the branch of a tree, but many people also interpret it as troublemaker. As history would later prove, Mandela would indeed become someone who challenged injustice and refused to remain silent. Mandela was born into the Thembu royal family, a respected African tribe known for its rich traditions and cultural heritage. His father, Gadla Henry Mafakanyiswa, was a chief and advisor to the Thembu king. Although Mandela's family was not wealthy, they were highly respected in their community. His mother, Nozakeni Fanny, was a kind and deeply religious woman. She taught young Mandela important values such as humility, honesty, kindness, and respect for others. These lessons would remain with him throughout his entire life. Mandela's childhood was simple but joyful. He grew up in a small village surrounded by beautiful hills, open fields, and flowing streams. There was no electricity, no running water, and none of the modern conveniences we enjoy today. Yet Mandela often described his childhood as one of freedom and happiness. As a young boy, he spent his days running barefoot across the fields, herding cattle, swimming in rivers, and playing traditional games with his friends. Life was peaceful, and he felt deeply connected to nature and his community. One of Mandela's favorite activities was listening to stories told by the elders of his village. At night, families would gather around a fire while older members of the community shared stories about brave warriors, wise leaders, and heroic struggles from the past. These stories filled young Mandela's imagination and inspired him to dream of becoming a leader who could help his people. Among all the lessons he learned during childhood, one message stood out above the rest. His father once explained that a true leader is not someone who seeks power for personal gain. A real leader is someone who serves others and works for the good of the community. Those words stayed with Mandela for the rest of his life. However, his peaceful childhood would soon face a difficult challenge. When Mandela was only 9 years old, his father became seriously ill and passed away. The loss was heartbreaking for the young boy. He loved and admired his father deeply, and suddenly life felt uncertain. But sometimes difficult moments opened the door to new opportunities. After his father's death, Mandela's mother took him to live with Chief Jongintaba Dalindyebo, the acting ruler of the Thembu people. The chief welcomed Mandela into his household and treated him like one of his own children. This experience changed Mandela's life forever. For the first time, he was exposed to a larger world beyond his small village. Living in the chief's residence allowed Mandela to observe important meetings where tribal leaders discussed community problems and made decisions. He watched how leaders listened carefully, respected different opinions, and worked together to find solutions. These experiences became his first lessons in leadership. Mandela noticed something interesting about the chief. Rather than speaking first, the chief often listened quietly while others shared their thoughts. Only after everyone had spoken would he offer his opinion. Years later, Mandela would remember this lesson and say that a good leader is like a shepherd who guides from behind while allowing others to believe they are leading the way. As Mandela grew older, education became an important part of his life. At the age of 7, he began attending a local Methodist school. It was there that one of his teachers gave him the English name Nelson, following a common practice used in many schools during that period. Although he never fully understood why he needed an English name, he accepted it and focused on learning. Mandela quickly proved to be a hard-working and curious student. He loved reading books and learning about history, geography, and literature. Education opened new doors in his mind and allowed him to imagine a future beyond the boundaries of his village. He became especially interested in stories about leaders who fought for justice and freedom. The more he learned, the more he realized how powerful education could be. Many years later, Mandela would famously say, "Education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world." This belief would guide him throughout his life. As a teenager, Mandela began to notice the unfair treatment of black South Africans. Even though he was still young, he could see that opportunities were not equal. Many black families faced hardships and restrictions that prevented them from enjoying the same rights as white citizens. These observations planted important questions in his mind. Why should people be treated differently because of the color of their skin? Why should some people enjoy freedom while others live under restrictions? At first, Mandela did not have the answers. But deep inside, a desire for justice was beginning to grow. He did not yet know that one day he would dedicate his entire life to fighting inequality and building a better future for millions of people. For now, he remained a young student with big dreams, a strong sense of curiosity, and a growing determination to make a difference. Little did he know that the journey ahead would test his courage in ways he could never imagine. In the next part of our story, Nelson Mandela leaves his traditional home, pursues higher education, and begins the path that will eventually transform him into one of the most influential leaders in world history. Welcome back, dear learners. In Part 1, we explored Nelson Mandela's early childhood, his family background, and the experiences that shaped his character. We learned how a young boy from a small village began developing the values of leadership, responsibility, and justice. Now, let's continue his remarkable journey. As Mandela entered his teenage years, he became more aware of the challenges facing black South Africans. Although he lived under the care of Chief Jongintaba and received opportunities that many children did not have, he could see that life was not fair for everyone. South Africa was changing, and racial discrimination was becoming deeply rooted in society. Despite these challenges, Mandela remained focused on one thing: education. He understood that knowledge could open doors and create opportunities that seemed impossible. He worked hard in school and earned admission to Clarkberry Boarding Institute, one of the most respected schools for black students at the time. Leaving home for school was a major step in his life. For the first time, Mandela found himself among students from different backgrounds and communities. The experience broadened his perspective and taught him the importance of discipline, independence, and self-confidence. He was not the smartest student in every subject, but he was determined and hardworking. His teachers admired his dedication and willingness to learn. After completing his studies at Clarkberry, Mandela attended Healdtown, a Methodist college known for producing future African leaders. At Healdtown, Mandela continued developing his leadership skills. He participated in debates, discussions, and school activities that encouraged critical thinking. The young man who once listened quietly to stories around a village fire was now learning how to communicate ideas, solve problems, and inspire others. But Mandela's journey was only beginning. In 1939, he enrolled at the prestigious University of Fort Hare, one of the few higher education institutions available to black Africans. For Mandela, attending university was a dream come true. Fort Hare was more than just a place of learning. It was a center of political thought and intellectual discussion. Students came from across Africa, bringing different perspectives and ideas about freedom, equality, and social change. Mandela was excited to be part of such an environment. He studied English, politics, history, and law. More importantly, he began meeting young people who shared his desire to improve society. At the university, Mandela experienced his first direct involvement in student politics. One day, students organized a protest against the university administration. They believed that students deserved a stronger voice in decisions affecting campus life. Mandela supported the movement. As a result, he was asked to serve on a student representative council. However, when disagreements arose between students and university authorities, Mandela refused to compromise his principles. He chose to stand with his fellow students rather than remain silent. This decision came at a cost. Because of his participation in the protest, Mandela was asked to leave the university before completing his degree. For many people, this might have felt like a devastating failure, but Mandela saw it differently. The experience taught him an important lesson. Standing up for what is right sometimes requires sacrifice. When he returned home, another challenge awaited him. Chief Taba had arranged marriages for both Mandela and his cousin. In traditional culture, this was considered normal and respectful. However, Mandela had different plans for his future. He wanted to continue his education, build his own life, and make his own decisions. Faced with a difficult choice, Mandela made a bold move. Together with his cousin, he left home and traveled to Johannesburg, South Africa's largest city. The journey would change his life forever. Johannesburg was unlike anything Mandela had ever seen. The city was busy, crowded, and filled with opportunity. Tall buildings, busy streets, and endless activity created an atmosphere of excitement. But beneath the energy and progress, Mandela discovered a painful reality. Black South Africans faced severe discrimination. They worked long hours for low wages, lived in overcrowded neighborhoods, and were denied many basic rights. The contrast was impossible to ignore. While some people enjoyed wealth and privilege, others struggled simply to survive. These experiences deeply affected Mandela. For the first time, he witnessed racial injustice on a large scale. Determined to support himself, Mandela took several jobs while continuing his education. He worked as a security guard and later found employment at a law firm. Although the work was difficult, it introduced him to the legal system and exposed him to people who would influence his future. One of those individuals was Walter Sisulu, a respected activist and community leader. Sisulu quickly recognized Mandela's intelligence, determination, and leadership potential. The two men formed a friendship that would last for many years. Walter Sisulu encouraged Mandela to continue studying law and become more involved in the struggle for equality. His advice would prove life-changing. Through Sisulu, Mandela met lawyers, activists, and political thinkers who were working to challenge racial discrimination in South Africa. Their conversations opened Mandela's eyes to a larger mission. He began to realize that personal success alone was not enough. True leadership required helping others and fighting against injustice. Inspired by these ideas, Mandela enrolled in law studies and continued pursuing his education despite financial difficulties. Life was far from easy. There were days when he had very little money. Sometimes he struggled to pay rent or buy food, yet he refused to give up. Every challenge strengthened his determination. He believed that education would give him the tools needed to create meaningful change. During this period, Mandela spent countless hours reading books, attending discussions, and learning about political movements around the world. He studied the lives of leaders who had fought against oppression and injustice. The more he learned, the more convinced he became that South Africa needed change. A new purpose was beginning to emerge. Mandela was no longer simply a student trying to build a career. He was becoming a young leader with a vision for a better future. The experiences of Johannesburg transformed him. They showed him both the suffering caused by discrimination and the incredible strength of people who refused to accept it. Without realizing it, Mandela was taking the first steps toward becoming a national leader. Soon, he would join a political movement that would define the rest of his life. He would meet courageous individuals who shared his dream of freedom, and together they would begin one of the most important struggles in modern history. But that journey comes next. In Part 3, we will explore how Nelson Mandela joined the African National Congress, became a rising political leader, and began his fight against the apartheid system that divided South Africa. Welcome back, dear learners. In Part 2, we followed Nelson Mandela's journey from a small village to the bustling city of Johannesburg. We saw how education, hardship, and new experiences shaped his thinking and inspired him to pursue justice. Now, in Part 3, We will discover how Mandela became involved in politics and began his lifelong struggle against one of the most unfair systems in history, apartheid. By the early 1940s, Mandela was studying law and working to support himself in Johannesburg. Every day, he witnessed the harsh reality faced by black South Africans. People were denied opportunities simply because of their race. Families were forced to live in poor neighborhoods. Many workers earned very little money despite working long hours. Basic rights that should have belonged to everyone were reserved for only a small part of the population. The more Mandela observed these injustices, the more determined he became to help change the system. During this time, his friend and mentor Walter Sisulu introduced him to members of the African National Congress, commonly known as the ANC. The ANC was an organization dedicated to fighting for the rights of black South Africans and promoting equality for all citizens. Mandela attended meetings and listened carefully to experienced leaders discuss strategies for achieving justice. At first, he was a quiet observer. He preferred listening and learning rather than speaking. However, as he gained confidence, he began sharing his own ideas. His intelligence, passion, and strong sense of fairness quickly impressed those around him. In 1944, Mandela officially joined the ANC. That same year, he helped establish the ANC Youth League alongside other young activists, including Walter Sisulu, Oliver Tambo, and Anton Lembede. The Youth League believed that stronger action was needed to challenge racial discrimination. They wanted young people to become actively involved in shaping the future of South Africa. Mandela was one of the most energetic members of the movement. He believed that ordinary people had the power to create extraordinary change when they worked together. His confidence and leadership skills continued to grow. At the same time, Mandela's personal life was also changing. In 1944, he married Evelyn Mace, a nurse who shared his hopes for a better future. The couple started a family and welcomed children into their lives. Mandela loved his family deeply, but balancing family responsibilities with political activism was not easy. As his involvement in the struggle increased, he spent more time attending meetings, organizing campaigns, and working with fellow activists. The demands of leadership were beginning to shape his life. Then, in 1948, a major turning point occurred. The National Party won South Africa's national election and officially introduced a system called apartheid. The word apartheid means separateness. Under this system, racial segregation became law. Black South Africans were denied basic rights and freedoms. They could not vote, own property in many areas, or move freely around the country. Schools, hospitals, transportation, neighborhoods, and public facilities were separated according to race. The laws were designed to keep power in the hands of the white minority while restricting opportunities for everyone else. For Mandela, these new laws confirmed what he had already seen. The system was deeply unjust, and something had to be done. The ANC responded by organizing peaceful campaigns, protests, and acts of civil disobedience. Mandela became one of the movement's most active organizers. He traveled across communities, spoke at public gatherings, and encouraged people to stand together against discrimination. His speeches were inspiring and powerful. People admired his confidence and his ability to explain complex issues in a simple way. He believed that courage was not about being fearless. It was about acting despite fear. As Mandela would later say, "Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the triumph over it." The movement continued to grow. Thousands of people joined protests and demonstrations. Many participants knew they could be arrested, lose their jobs, or face violence, yet they continued because they believed in freedom. One of the most important campaigns during this period was the Defiance Campaign of 1952. This campaign encouraged people to peacefully break unjust laws as a form of protest. Participants entered restricted areas, ignored discriminatory regulations, and openly challenged apartheid rules. The campaign attracted national attention. It also helped transform Mandela into one of South Africa's most recognized political leaders. His reputation continued to grow. In the same year, Mandela achieved another important milestone. He became a qualified lawyer and partnered with his close friend Oliver Tambo to establish a law firm. The firm became the first black-owned law practice in South Africa. 4. Many black South Africans finding legal assistance was extremely difficult. Mandela and Tambo provided support to people who had nowhere else to turn. Their office was often crowded with individuals seeking help against unfair treatment. Every day, Mandela witnessed the human cost of apartheid. He saw families separated by discriminatory laws. He saw workers punished unfairly. He saw ordinary people struggling simply because of the color of their skin. These experiences strengthened his commitment to justice. However, the government was becoming increasingly concerned about the growing influence of Mandela, and the ANC authorities monitored activists closely. Meetings were watched, leaders were followed, many were arrested. Mandela himself was frequently questioned by police and faced various legal restrictions. Despite these challenges, he refused to back down. He believed that freedom was worth fighting for. As the struggle intensified, Mandela realized that the road ahead would not be easy. There would be sacrifices, there would be risks, and there would be difficult decisions. Yet his determination remained stronger than ever. The young man who had once dreamed of becoming a lawyer was now becoming a national leader. His voice was inspiring thousands. His courage was attracting supporters across the country, and his fight against apartheid was only beginning. The years ahead would bring greater challenges than he had ever imagined. The government would increase its efforts to silence opposition. Violence would spread, and Mandela would face decisions that could change the course of his life forever. But those events are still to come. In Part 4, we will explore how Mandela's struggle intensified, how the government responded with force, and how he eventually became one of the most wanted men in South Africa. Welcome back, dear learners. In Part 3, we learned how Nelson Mandela joined the African National Congress, helped establish the ANC Youth League, and became one of the leading voices in the fight against apartheid. But as Mandela's influence grew, so did the government's determination to stop him. The struggle for freedom was entering a dangerous new phase. By the mid-1950s, apartheid laws had become even more oppressive. The government introduced new restrictions that controlled almost every aspect of life for Black South. Africans, people were forced to carry identification documents, known as passbooks. Without these documents, they could be arrested simply for being in certain areas, families were separated, communities were destroyed, opportunities were limited. The dream of equality seemed further away than ever. Despite these challenges, Mandela and the ANC continued organizing peaceful resistance. In 1955, leaders from different communities gathered to create an important document called the Freedom Charter. The charter outlined a vision for a democratic South Africa where all citizens, regardless of race, would have equal rights and opportunities. Its message was simple but powerful. South Africa belonged to everyone who lived in it. The government viewed these ideas as a threat. Soon after, authorities launched a massive crackdown on political activists. In 1956, Mandela and more than 150 other leaders were arrested and charged with treason. The government accused them of trying to overthrow the state. If convicted, they could face severe punishment. The trial lasted for years. During this difficult period, Mandela spent countless hours preparing legal defenses while continuing his political work. The charges placed enormous pressure on him and his family, yet he remained calm and determined. Eventually, after a lengthy legal battle, the court found the accused leaders not guilty. The government had failed to prove its case. For Mandela and his colleagues, it was an important victory, but the celebration would not last long. Across South Africa, tensions continued to rise more. People were demanding freedom. More communities were resisting apartheid, and the government was responding with increasing violence. Then came one of the darkest moments in South African history. On March 21, 1960, thousands of peaceful protesters gathered in the township of Sharpeville. They were demonstrating against the past laws that restricted the movement of black citizens. The protest was intended to be peaceful, but events took a tragic turn. Police opened fire on the unarmed crowd. When the shooting ended, 69 people had been killed and hundreds more were injured. Many victims were shot while trying to run away. The Sharpeville massacre shocked the world. News of the tragedy spread quickly across international newspapers and television broadcasts. People everywhere condemned the violence. For Mandela, Sharpeville was a turning point. For years, he had supported peaceful resistance. He believed that nonviolent protest could bring change. But after witnessing repeated acts of brutality, he began questioning whether peaceful methods alone would be enough. The government responded to the growing unrest by banning the ANC and other political organizations. Suddenly, Mandela and his fellow activists could no longer operate openly. Their movement was forced underground. Mandela now faced one of the most difficult decisions of his life. He knew that continuing the struggle would place him in serious danger, but he also knew that remaining silent was not an option. After long discussions with other leaders, a new organization was formed. It was called Umkhonto we Sizwe, which means Spear of the Nation. Mandela became one of its key leaders. The group's goal was not to attack civilians. Instead, they focused on sabotaging government facilities and infrastructure connected to the apartheid system. Mandela believed that these actions could pressure the government without causing unnecessary loss of life. However, the risks were enormous. The authorities launched a nationwide effort to capture him. Mandela was now one of the most wanted men in South Africa. To avoid arrest, he lived in secret. He moved constantly from one location to another. He slept in safe houses, traveled at night, and used disguises to avoid detection. Sometimes he dressed as a worker. Other times he posed as a driver. His appearance changed frequently. Few people knew where he was at any given moment because of his ability to evade capture. Journalists gave him a famous nickname, the Black Pimpernel. Like the fictional hero who escaped his enemies time and time again, Mandela seemed impossible to catch. Yet life underground came at a heavy cost. He rarely saw his family. He missed important moments. In the lives of his children, every day carried uncertainty. Every journey involved risk. Still, Mandela remained committed to the cause. He believed that freedom required sacrifice. During this period, Mandela also traveled outside South Africa. For the first time in his life, he visited other African countries and met leaders from around the world. He attended conferences, received military training, and sought international support for the anti-apartheid movement. These experiences expanded his understanding of global politics and strengthened his belief that apartheid could eventually be defeated. Wherever he traveled, Mandela spoke about justice, equality, and human dignity. His message inspired people far beyond South Africa's borders, but while Mandela was gaining international support, the government was closing in. Police intelligence operations intensified. Informants were recruited. Roadblocks were established. Authorities became determined to end Mandela's campaign once and for all. Then, in August 1962, everything changed. After more than a year of living as a fugitive, Mandela was arrested. Police stopped the car he was traveling in and took him into custody. Many people believe that information from foreign intelligence agencies helped authorities locate him. Whatever the reason, Mandela's time as a free man had come to an end. His arrest made headlines. Around the world, supporters feared that the government would use the opportunity to silence one of its most powerful opponents. But Mandela was not afraid. He understood the risks when he chose this path, and he was prepared to face the consequences. The government charged him with leaving the country illegally and encouraging workers to strike. He was found guilty and sentenced to prison. Yet this was only the beginning. While Mandela was serving his sentence, police discovered additional evidence linking him and other activists to underground resistance activities. New charges would soon follow. The next trial would become one of the most famous political trials in modern history. and the outcome could determine not only Mandela's future, but also the future of South Africa itself. In Part 5, we will explore the historic Rivonia trial, Mandela's powerful courtroom speech, and the moment he was sentenced to life imprisonment. Welcome back, dear learners. In Part 4, we followed Nelson Mandela as he went underground, became one of South Africa's most wanted men, and was eventually arrested after years of resisting the apartheid government. Now, we arrive at one of the most important chapters in his life, a chapter that would transform him from a national activist into a global symbol of courage and freedom. After Mandela's arrest in 1962, the South African government believed it had finally silenced one of its strongest opponents. But events were about to take a dramatic turn. While Mandela was serving his prison sentence, police raided a secret farmhouse in Rivonia, a suburb of Johannesburg. The property had been used by leaders of the anti-apartheid movement to hold meetings and plan activities. During the raid, authorities discovered documents, letters, and strategic plans connected to underground resistance efforts. The evidence was enough for the government to launch a major legal case. Mandela and several other activists were charged with sabotage and conspiracy against the state. The case became known as the Rivonia trial, one of the most famous political trials in modern history. The stakes were incredibly high. The government wanted to make an example of the accused leaders. Many observers believed Mandela and his colleagues could face the death penalty. Around the world, people watched closely. Supporters feared that South Africa was preparing to execute one of the most important voices for justice and equality. Yet Mandela remained calm, understood that the courtroom gave him an opportunity to speak not only to the judges but also to the entire world. Rather than focusing solely on his defense, Mandela used the trial to explain why he had chosen to fight against apartheid. He wanted people everywhere to understand the suffering caused by racial discrimination. He wanted them to hear the truth. April 20, 1964, Mandela delivered what would become one of the most powerful speeches in history. Standing in the courtroom, he spoke with dignity, courage, and conviction. He explained that his actions were motivated by a desire for justice, not hatred. He described his dream of a country where all people could live together as equals, regardless of race or background. Then he spoke the words that would echo across generations. He said, "I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and achieve, but if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die."